Thank you for coming today. I know it's a difficult day. It's Monday night. So I'm very happy to have Professor Oleksandr Pronkevich in Rethymno. Oleksandr is a professor at Ukrainian Catholic University and a researcher of Spanish literature and culture. He is recently teaching a course on Ukrainian drama and poetry about the war in English translations. The course is being taught at the Ukrainian Catholic University in cooperation with the University of Notre Dame. So he teaches with other colleagues such as Tatiana Savchenko, Peter Holland, Romana Huk, and Bodaba Yakobchuk. I'm sorry if I say any names wrongly. And I will also introduce you to John Freedman, who is a translator and theater critic. He's the curator of the Ukrainian component of Ukrainian drama translations website. From his survey, it seems that John moved quickly at the onset of the Russian invasion to bring new Ukrainian dramatic works to global audiences. He has been working with Philip Arnaud at Baltimore Center for International Theater Development, Maksym Kurochkin at Kiev's Theater of Playwrights, Noah Birkstead-Breen at London Sputnik Theatre, and others. And the project has arranged for numerous pledge readings and fundraisers in 15 countries and in 12 languages. Events have already taken place in Hong Kong, the Czech and Slovak Republics, Germany, and Austria. John is responsible of a series of podcasts with the title A Dictionary of Ukrainian Emotions, and episode 1, How to Talk to the Dead, on Ukrainska Pravda. And he has shared the link, which is on our website of the Institute for Mediterranean Studies. Today there will be an event where first Oleksandr will speak about the disasters of war in contemporary Ukrainian drama, and then they will develop a dialogue, Oleg and John, on translating drama and probably on specific aspects of the theater of Ukraine. So we are all ears. Oleg, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for your presentation, and our idea is to not only to tell our story, but also to listen and to answer your questions. And you may ask whether the Ukrainian war drama is a phenomenon, and as a literary scholar I would say yes, because you can see the first part of this slide. It consists of the names. I'm not going to read the names of the playwrights, and I would like to say that this list is not complete because we still very active. We're having very active production of plays and staging of plays and representations of plays and something like this, and it is the response of the Ukrainian culture to the war. We have now hundreds and hundreds of plays, and they were translated into English, into German, into Spanish, and to other languages, not as many as in English, you see. And I will try to explain, to present the cultural context, and we'll try to find the reason why this phenomenon became possible. In my explanation, I start with the idea of double epistemic injustice. You can read the definition of the epistemic injustice is a very specific way of receiving knowledge about one culture by other cultures or by another culture. It means that if we take the case of Ukraine, our information of Ukraine, about Ukraine, was received in a very distorted way actually, I would say mythology, lies, or other things, or the country for many, many decades remained invisible. And if we speak about Greece, I don't know how much people know about Ukraine here in Greece. In other countries, the situation can be different. Like, for example, in Germany, they know more, in Poland, more, in the United States of America, more. But if we come to Spain, they know nothing. You see, they know nothing. And it's epistemic injustice. That's a kind of filter which spoils the information, which destroys this information. Why am I speaking about double epistemic injustice? Because we have two types of epistemic injustices. The first one is Russia. Russia always deleted information about Ukraine, or did its best to present all Ukrainian things as something very Russian, and in the shade of Russian culture, Ukraine disappeared. And unfortunately, the Western countries, for many decades, followed Russian cultural propaganda, and they did not see Ukraine at all. Maybe it sounds a little bit exaggeration, but if we speak about general public, so they're just, when we were in the United States of America now, and it's the first name they cited was Shevchenko, but not Taras Shevchenko, but soccer player Taras Shevchenko, not Taras, but another Shevchenko. That's what they knew about Ukraine, very strange ideas. The country, which had 50 million inhabitants, actually one of the largest countries in Europe, and many people, okay, what the hell is Ukraine? And in my opinion, we Ukrainians, we also are responsible for this, because our Ukrainian government did not do what it was supposed to do, to disseminate information about Ukraine. But I'm not going to speak about it. But you see, so the result was the country was practically invisible. And what was the effect of the war? You see, the idea was simple. Putin's idea was simple. I would come to Ukraine, and they would be happy, and because everyone is afraid of me, the West is afraid of me, the world is afraid of Russia because they're crazy, and so on and so forth. You see, and it would take us 3 days to get Kiev, but Ukraine began doing something strange, from the European viewpoint. It began to resist. And it was so surprising for the whole world. It produced a huge wave of sympathy and support, and a huge wave of interest in Ukraine. And at this particular moment, or even before, because when we speak about when the war began, for us, the war began in 2014. Then there was a long period when the war even was not recognized in Ukraine as war, but on the 24th of February, we say that it is the full-scale invasion. It was so shocking that such a stupid, absolutely paranoid thing could happen, that, of course, Ukraine became visible. And the playwrights, not only playwrights, poets, those who produced essays, and so, of course, decided to use this moment to speak about Ukraine, to communicate the truth, to get support, to do other things, just to get rid of these traumatic experiences. And myself, I wrote text for the Spanish newspaper to for 6 months, to get some, some support or something like that. And we should say that the Ukrainian drama became visible, but before, or actually some events coincided. John will tell us more about it, because the Ukrainian theater itself, playwrights, they understood that they're not visible because they are producing very strange drama, which is not contemporary. They were deeply dissatisfied. They were looked upon themselves very critically, and they created groups of playwrights who wanted to renovate. And I mean, the theater of playwrights in Kiev, they definitely had, before the war, they had the idea that they have to do something about renovating theater. But you see this huge wave of support, which Ukraine got, opened ways for Ukrainian playwrights. And so they were invited to work abroad, in residences. They got stipends, they got opportunities to write plays and do something, and to become part of the world theatrical process. It actually had happened before, but it was happening before 2022, but in a very, very slow way, I think. Maybe I'm mistaken. You know better this situation because you work with theater. But my idea is that but after 2022, it opened completely. And another factor which created this special effect, it was the all plays or many plays were very quickly translated into global languages. First of all, English. And we have a very unique opportunity to speak to the person who is in the center of this process. You see, because John Freedman will tell about it more, but the idea, he and his other colleagues very quickly, they got the texts of the Ukrainian plays, and they very quickly, in a huge amount, this is amazing, they translated those plays into English, and they used one more element of the contemporary civilization. Actually, it's contemporary communicative technologies, communication technologies like YouTube, Vimeo, or other things, you see. And another important factor was very, very good support of the global theatrical civilization, because, you know, in April, in March, in 2024, so we could read, okay, presentations of plays in Broadway, or in London, or in Germany. And the most popular form of presenting the plays were dramatic readings. It's not the final product, but it's the product which can be easily recorded, then transmitted, combined with other elements like orchestras playing music, can become part of festivals, and there were very many of them. It was John created his website. He will speak about it, and then the plays were taken from this website for free, and people who collect money, they donate the money to the Ukrainian armed forces and to support Ukraine. It was a global, without any exaggeration, was a global movement, which was not possible, by the way, something like 15 years ago. It is the first case in the world history when theater and drama react to the war directly by using social media to such a great extent. Okay, so, okay, and what was the result? I told you that Ukrainian playwrights became famous, unknown, they were involved in the global theatrical process. Some of the plays, not all plays, see, were staged in the very conventional way. You mean like performances in the most important theaters, like in the cities like London or Boston or Frankfurt and mine or something like that, you know, and because playwrights, you know, contacted. And then another thing is the influence of this process on the Ukrainian theater now. What is going on in the Ukrainian theater after 2022? Russian plays written by Russian authors, okay, they have disappeared from the Ukrainian theater. And you know, this empty space is taken by Ukrainian classics, by the translations of the international drama, and to some extent by plays about the war. This is a specific problem because Ukrainian audience, for the Ukrainian audience, it's not so easy to go to theaters to watch plays about the war, because in our country we know much more about the war than the playwrights. You see, this is a very interesting situation for playwrights. We can speak about it, what people do to overcome this communicative you see, this difficulty, this problem, to take this challenge. Okay, and we should say, when we read about plays, we should remember that there were three, at least, main stagers when the plays were written. The first period was from 2014 until the 24th of February 2022. It's a very, very interesting period because on the official level, the Ukrainian state and the Ukrainian propaganda and the Ukrainian audiences, they pretended not to see the war. So we use this, so the special term was used, anti-terrorist operation, but in Donbass, somewhere in Donbass, and then, you know, but it was the war. It was cruel, it was bloody, but for some reason, you know, the dominant discourse did not recognize it. And one of the most famous plays written about the war, Bad Roads, by Natalka Blok, actually shows this situation, because the lady journalist, she travels to Donbass area, you know, to show the war, and to tell about the war to other Ukrainians who do not want to know about it. And it defines the strategy of writing the play, because it's a monologue of the journalist. Her name is Natalia, and it's, you know, strange monologue full of erotic dreams and her sexual desire to the hero of the war. You know, this is the beginning. It actually, it was very shocking, I think, for Ukrainian audience. The play was very quickly translated into English and staged in London, and it worked very well in London. But it is still rather shocking for. It contains a lot of elements of future plays. It's a testimonial drama. It's a documentary drama telling about, you know, the reality in a very direct and frightened way. The second period was the first 2 or 3 months of after the 24th of February 2022. You know, it was the situation when you know, all of us, we felt pain, you know, we were shocked, we were surprised, you know, and I describe it as just the way of writing plays is automatic writing in the surrealist way. You know, that's just what produced, people felt pain and just to do something about it, they wrote plays. And then one of the plays which I cite here, but it's by Neda Nezhdana, it's the closed sky. It's interesting play, but it was not your translation. It was your, yeah. It's about four women with almost the same name, different ages, define themselves in a very strange room, or I don't know, bunker or something like that, you know, in the darkness, and now in the talk, and it's like a situation of collective psychotherapy session, and the like traveling to the depth of memories and other things, but many things were produced spontaneously. So that was, you know, like transcription of what we said in our everyday life. You can see it. It's like Nina Zakhozhenko, for example, her plays. She just copied the text of teenagers or other people, you know. That's what we said, you know, and it is was very shocking. And then uh, until now we have a very long, very complicated, and we don't know when this period will end, but it's the moment of reflection when people are used, you know, they have adjusted in some way to this terrible situation, and we start working through our traumas and looking for more sophisticated ways. And here I give the title of Yuliia Hudoshnyk. I like this play, Beware of a Mind. It's about the consequences of the war for a woman. She's a sapper, you know, and how she becomes, you know, she loses her human being. She ceases to be a woman because she is involved in this terrible activity, you know, this like looking for mines and other things. And here we have some elements of the Greek mythology. She says, I'm Persephone, yeah, and I cannot be a normal woman, and I become a, you know, mind. Beware of a mind. That means beware of me, because I can explode. You know, this is something. It's a new level of reflection. It's not showing what is going on, to tell the truth, the genocide practices of the Russian war, but it's about the negative consequences of the war to all of us, you know. This is interesting. Okay, and one more thing is experiences which are reflected in the plays. It's interesting. If you take a look at the Ukrainian war drama as a you know, I would say, system of numerous mirrors were reflecting the experiences, you can understand what the war is. You know, it's something strange what I'm saying now. I know, but it's just so. First of all, of course, you can find a lot of plays which are full of violence and shocking. They tell or even represent or even show in videos, yeah, a lot of cases of the Russian genocide against Ukraine. You see mass extermination of people, tortures, you know, destructions of the cities, and other things. And I would say it is uh, maybe I can go to the next slide, you know. that's about the form of the plays. Yeah, most of them, they are verbatim theater. There are many of them verbatim theater. Maybe you can disagree with me, but I cannot find a lot of examples of conventional theater like playing, showing. It's more about telling the story. And I would say it makes sense to consider those plays in terms of post-dramatic theater, which is absolutely new. We didn't have post-dramatic theater before. Now it's becoming something absolutely clear. And one of the examples is the play of Katerina Pinkova, Marathon Russian Roulette. This is an awful play. It's about destruction of Mariupol, bombing of Mariupol, and she is running, among explosions of bombs, trying to save her daughter, and her other daughter is somewhere lost. And then you can see a lot of, violence and presented in a very naturalist way, naturalist in terms of Emile Zola, because naturalist theater in theatrical studies means something different. It's Stanislavski system, which was very, very influential in the Soviet and post-Soviet times, And another thing is surrealist aesthetics. It's very interesting that John brought the book, which is titled Ghost Land. And it is interesting. I didn't know about this translation. I translated the title. And I may say maybe my English is not so bad, that I found the word. It's just, it has three parts, and about soldiers who are on the front line, but one part is full of typical surrealist visions. It's like, I don't know, Apollinaire's poetry for me, some strange associations and so on. Іринка, скільки залишилось часу? Ще можна? Okay, good. And then nightmares and other things, and we use a lot of videos, and many plays appear videos. One of the examples is Crimea 5 p.m. but Natalia Vorozhbit and another co-author. It tells us about histories of what happened to the Crimean activists. All of them were arrested and were sentenced to 15, 20 years of imprisonment. And the images appear in the pictures, and then it's like, presentations of their lives and detail about themselves. I would say it's another example of post-dramatic theater. The actors are present on the stage. Okay, then one play I want to recommend you before I finish. I like it. It's written by Hanna Halas. She is a playwright, a researcher, and a translator, and we cooperate a lot. And she translated herself, in this case. And this play is titled Chronicles of the Evacuated Body and the Lost Soul. In English, she uses the title Chronicles. But I like the Ukrainian title because it shows us the most terrible thing, which, for example, I feel, it's alienation. That's when I think you know this concept of alienation, because when I was young, I used to read plays by Jean-Paul Sartre, and books written by French existentialist writers. And they say about this, just you look upon your body and you understand that it's not your body. You're become something different from your body, and this is some communication breakdown, the border which appears, the border between me and the world, and between me and myself, between me and my relatives, and my friends, my children. And here we have I body, and I like this I body. You see, emotionless, incentive shell. It's empty.
Evacuated body.
It's evacuated body, emotionless, incentive shell. Refers to oneself using third person pronouns. So, body and soul, they're separated. And then body continues doing many things mechanically. It's an autobiographical play. And Hanna Halas has 3 kids. And you understand, Yana, when she is evacuated, when she ran away, my wife Irina does not like the word to run away. Okay, but it is so. Though she she is in Great Britain and other things, but kids continue doing what they're supposed to do. They run, they ask for food, they play, and the body continues taking care of them. But I saw emotion and empathy, substance, like this, refers to oneself using first person pronoun. Comments, sees, looks at what the I body is doing, and this is something shocking. It's the I like this play because it does not contain any shocking images. It does not want to impress us by the cruelty of the war. It does not work, to surprise or to do something, but it is really awful, because the effect of the war is to split the world, which is lost forever, which is broken, which is I'm not going to tell you what. Nothing special happened to us in comparison to other people. But my philological school, which I created, has been destroyed forever. You see, and all my followers are dispersed in the world. They are good students. They were good students because they are efficient. Actually, this is more or less all I wanted to say. And I'm not going to read this. And I would like to pass to the second part of our discussion, translating the war drama and questions for John Freedman. Okay, we continue. The first question: could you tell about your experience between 2014 and February 24? February 23 is my birthday. Just think about it, yeah? And I wrote in the Spanish newspaper, Feliz cumple, profe. So February 24, 2022, I'm lost in in dates, you understand the question, yeah? How how did you get involved in the translation of plays? But yeah, okay.
First of all, I want to thank you for your presentation because I've been involved in this now for 2.5 years, and you explained a great deal to me in this last half hour. I'm involved in this practically. You have a more theoretical approach, and you have explained a great deal to me about what I have been doing and what people have been doing around me. I'm very grateful, Oleksandr. It's wonderful. And this is a wonderful way to step into this and go back to the very beginning of your talk. What was I doing in those 10 years before the full-scale invasion? I was, along with Maksym Kurochkin, a great Ukrainian playwright, along with Natalka Blok, a great Ukrainian playwright. I was living in Moscow presenting Maksym and Natalka as Russian playwrights because they wrote in Russian. And so I was, along with Maksym Kurochkin, along with Natalka Blok, we were helping Ukraine be invisible by presenting their work through Russian language and through a Russian point of view. Now, we of course didn't see it that way, and in a sense, I'm not accusing anyone of anything. This is the way the world worked. This is what happened. I'm simply telling you that when Oleksandr asks me, what were you doing in those 10 years before? I was presenting Ukrainian playwrights as they were presenting themselves in a Russian context. And I will say that at a certain point, it was around 2015, I believe, it was about a year after Maidan, Maksym Kurochkin came to me and he said, John, I would like to ask you to stop calling me a Russian playwright. And I can't say I was shocked by it, or shocked, of course I wasn't shocked. I can't say I was surprised by it, but I didn't expect it. But the instant he said it, I understood, yeah, of course, you're not a Russian playwright. And by this time, Natalka Blok had gone back to Kiev. Maksym continued to live in Moscow for a few more years. And so there was, I was a part, with everyone, I was a part of a machine, if you will, that was perpetuating the picture of Russian culture as the dominant culture. And that all changed very drastically. And when I say very drastically, I mean in a matter of hours. On the 24th of February, 2022. And it just so happens that on your birthday, the day before the full-scale invasion began, on your birthday, I wrote an essay for an American publication on why I am stepping away from my Russian point of view. It was the night of the war. I wrote it, I sent that off on email on the 23rd, and on the 24th, the invasion happened. I mean, it's an interesting thing, the way it happened. I was clearly sensing that there was an enormous change coming. I mean, we all sensed something was happening. The clouds were very black and they were coming in very harsh. So literally in the first few days after the invasion, I was basically paralyzed, along with my wife, Oksana, who was born in Ukraine and worked in Moscow as an actress and director for several decades. We were basically paralyzed. We just didn't know our lives were caving in. Your department that you created was falling apart. Our lives that we had created were falling apart, and we didn't know what to do. And so we sat in front of a television about 18 hours a day, watching the horror of what was happening. And I had been involved in another project earlier, working with Belarus writers. And in that project, I had worked very closely with a guy in Hong Kong, William Wong. And it was about 3 days after the invasion, the full-scale invasion, William Wong wrote me an email, and he said, "John, what are we going to do? Can we do something to help the Ukrainian writers?" And it was like, it was the proverbial light bulb went on. It was like, all of a sudden, yeah, what are we going to do? And yes, what can we do to help the Ukrainian writers? And so literally in a matter of days, I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but in a matter of days, I had connected with Maksym Kurochkin in Kiev in the Theater of Playwrights. I'd connected with other writers, and people began sending me texts, and I began translating most of them. I've worked in very close contact with a translator in London by the name of John Farndon, who is a wonderful translator and poet and writer. And he and I have done the bulk of the translations. There are altogether, we have worked with about 15 different translators into English. And because of my project with Belarus in the recent past, I had lots of connections to people in Germany, in Finland, and else in Slovakia, in the Czech Republic. I reached out to translators there, and they began translating virtually right now. And everybody responded. You mentioned the fact, the way the world responded, the way when Ukraine showed that it was capable of showing resistance, the world responded. And this was a wonderful example of that. The way people stepped up. Not a single person asked about money. The notion of money had nothing to do with anything in any of this project. Everybody's work, everybody's labor, everybody's time was donated. It was all done because it needed to be done, and it took off in a very quick way. And yeah, we had enormous numbers. At this point, 2.5 years later, we have had over 670 events around the world.
So
yeah,
and please. What is the title of the website which you created for our?
Well, the project, I call the project and it didn't have a name when it started. It's one of those wonderful things. This is one of the things that I love about life, is that the work started, and then we started attaching names and philosophies to it. And it was about a month later that I came up with the notion of the worldwide Ukrainian play readings. Yeah, the worldwide Ukrainian play readings. So through that, it's not an organization, it's me. it's the stuff I've put together, and that my colleagues have helped me to put together, of course. But that's what we do. Everything that we do under the hat, if you will, of the Ukrainian world, the worldwide Ukrainian play readings.
Yeah, and would also like to say that they get the support of the academia. The people like myself. I'm professor of Spanish literature, by the way. I work with Spanish drama, and in my university we're teaching a course together with the University of Notre Dame. And my partner is Peter Holland. He's the world famous expert in Shakespeare. And so I work with Calderon, and he works with Shakespeare. And so many people are from Shakespeare studies, like Emma Veribalova, she's also from Shakespeare studies. And then, we use our knowledge to do this. You have mentioned the names of those who translated, and then we can go to question Or actually, this is more interesting. What problems do you have to solve when translating Ukrainian war dramas into English? Sorry for my spelling.
The first thing that I'll say is that the biggest problem is a very, very practical one, and that is that my knowledge of Ukrainian is very bad. When this all started, I can read Polish. I'm fluent in Russian. I can make my way through most Western Slavic texts, but that doesn't mean that I am in a position to actually do a good, performable translation of a Ukrainian text. So the very first thing I did was I grabbed texts that were written in Russian, and there were several texts written in Russian. Those were the ones I translated immediately. So those were ready within days. Next, it so happened that Oksana brought her relatives out of Ukraine to, we live in Chania, and Oksana brought her relatives to Chania to get them out of the war, grandmother, daughter, and grandson. And the grandmother in that group began working with me to translate. And I worked with her, I still do work with her. Whenever I translate Ukrainian, I sit down with Natasha Bratus, and together we go through the text. I go through questions, I prepare a rough translation. Natasha comes in, we discuss it, we talk about the problems. I get rid of all of the problems, and then I put it into a performable or publishable English. I will say that over the 2.5 years of working, my reading Ukrainian has become much better, but I would not ever attempt to work without Natasha at this point. As I like to say, only partly in jest, we are like the Lennon-McCartney of translation from Ukrainian. I can't imagine us splitting up. So Natasha Bratis and I are a team. That's obviously, that's the biggest and most immediate problem. The next problem is a problem that anybody has who has ever done translation, and you are translating experiences that are, for the most part, not familiar to, not understandable to the new audience. And you have to find a way to bridge the gap of lack of understanding, not understanding what it means. You know, in a contemporary Ukrainian text, the word siren, for example, that's enough for a Ukrainian. You can write an entire essay on the emotions, on the actions, on the fears, on the anger that come from the word siren. Now, that doesn't happen if I do it in English. If I write the word siren in English, it's just a siren, and the audience does not get all of that. So, you know, these are problems that you have to work on bringing into a text to the extent that you're able. Sure, you lose something. You always lose something in translation, and you try to gain something somewhere else. But it's one more thing I will add on that before we can go on to the next thing, and that is that I see the work that I am doing and the work that I'm doing with my colleagues. I see it very much as an attempt to educate a public, an English language public, to educate them and to make them more aware, to bring something to them that they do not know. And so it's very, very possible that the translations that I have done and that I'm doing are not the kind of translations that are going to last forever, like the great translators of Cervantes. You know, the great translators of Cervantes, their translations live on and on and on. My translations might not live on. Somebody may have to come later and do better, fuller job than I have done. I don't know. But that's not, I'm not thinking about 10 years from now, right now. I'm thinking about having an impact, bringing something to people that they do not know about. And I want to squeeze in right here. Oleksandr and I were talking about this before we began, and this is extremely important. This is very much to the core of what I'm doing. Vladimir Putin wrote an essay, believe it or not. I doubt he wrote it himself, but he probably sat next to somebody and said, let's put this in and put this in, and somebody wrote it for him. But one of the points of this essay that he wrote 8 months before the war began was that there is no Ukrainian literature, there's no Ukrainian language, there's no Ukrainian statehood. It is all a part of the greater Russian language, Russian statehood, etc. One of the things that we are working very hard to do, and when I say we, I'm talking about all of the Ukrainian writers and the translators, is that we are involved in showing the world that indeed Ukrainian culture exists, Ukrainian language exists, Ukrainian statehood exists, and they are separate from and independent of the Russian construct. It's a very important part of what we're doing.
And what is very important, in my opinion, is to stress that you and your colleagues, you have translated such a great amount of plays that was in very quickly. This is also unique. There's just immediate response to the war by making great amount of translated texts. And I would say that your part in the translation is maybe the most important one, because all your plays sound very good in English,
Yeah, I hope so.
They're very, very, very good, adjusted to the practices of English language performances.
I will say, yeah, I'll just say very briefly, I'll just say that in whenever I've done any of my translations, it's always, you work with the original text, then you do an edit and you're working with the original text again. And then at a certain point, you take the original text and you throw it away. and then you say, okay, now this text that I have created based on that one, it has to speak clearly to an English language audience. And that's what I do. Whether I do it well or not is not for me to say, but that's what I do.
Before starting working with you, I had to teach a course about translating drama. And one of the basic things which I learned is translating drama is a collective product. It's not just translator, it's working with actors, it's working with audiences, with directors, with all, so that the text can function, But besides translating, you make books, you write books, you create books. Could you tell more about your books?
Well, the first one that we did was based on texts of the Theater of Playwrights in Kiev. This is the first edition of it. It came out really fast. These texts were written between March and October of 2022, and this was published on January 3rd, 2023. It came out very quickly, thanks to a brilliant publisher, Nina Camberos and Laertes Press in the United States. And then we put the same book out in a second version, which is cleaned up, has some additional texts, has some additional information, called A Dictionary of Emotions in a Time of War. And I translated and we published Ghostland by Andrii Bondarenko. We are working on a 2-volume collection of works by Maksym Kurochkin. And not only this is an important thing. I'm glad I remembered this, because you talked about the way that, before the war, Ukrainian playwrights were not all that important. People didn't really know them. Their works weren't really done. And I remembered watching a Zoom of one of Maksym Kurochkin's readings. he did several readings at the Theater of Playwrights in Kiev, which is a captive audience. The people at the Theater of Playwrights are all people that want to be there. They're friends, they're colleagues, so they're all in. They're there to support the work. But Maksym did a very interesting thing. He took the final reading into the Institute of Literature in Kiev, and they did the readings. And as soon as the readings were done, the main professor there, I don't know who he is, you probably would know him, he stood up and he said, well, as we see, there is no Ukrainian drama, contemporary. There is no contemporary Ukrainian.
Very much like Institute of Literature. I have been working with them for 20 years. I know them.
Yeah. And Maksym got furious, and there was almost a fight. It was wonderful. I was sitting in Khanya watching this almost fight going on over Zoom. Maksym was furious, and this guy was saying, "You guys are all lousy here. It's not important," and this, that, and the other thing. Let me just jump ahead. That was in April, probably, of 2022. Now, there are contemporary Ukrainian playwrights being produced all over the country, to say nothing of all over around the world. Around the world is wonderful. It's extremely important for the writers, as you can imagine. It's extremely important for a writer to know that his or her work is somebody saw it and liked it in Connecticut, or California, or Hong Kong. Yeah, that's great, but a playwright's actual real life is in his or her home culture, because theater is a local art. Theater is a local art. And these writers are now being produced in large numbers throughout Ukraine. And it is because their voices and what they are bearing witness to is of importance to the audience. It's not always pleasant, as Oleksandr pointed out. A Ukrainian audience doesn't always want to go to the theater and watch something about the war. It's hard to do. And indeed, as Oleksandr points out, everybody sits in the audience and says, I know more about that than the playwright does. So it's a very difficult situation. And yet, the fact of the matter is that more and more and more theaters are producing these writers. And they are needed, they are necessary to the society. And this is something that has definitely come from the last 2.5 years of this writing. And I will just repeat it once again, because I want to drive it home. For me, it's the most important thing. It is a rejection. It is a total rejection of Vladimir Putin's claim that Ukrainian culture doesn't exist. On the contrary, theater has stepped up and proved, indeed we exist, indeed we are different. Yeah.
And one more extremely interesting project, and before I mentioned it, but you can read about it, podcasts, you see that another option to disseminate theater, as local knowledge and global knowledge. I would like to say that it's extremely interesting to teach the course about Ukrainian drama and poetry in English translations, because we have to change the syllabus. The practice. See, we provide our students with the syllabus, the detailed description of what they have to read and discuss, but during semester, another book created by John comes out, or another book, another anthology of Ukrainian plays somewhere in Great Britain, comes out, and we have to include at least parts of those texts into our courses. And we transform. This is something interesting. Peter said, okay, it was the first course like this in his life, because we are very strict about not changing the rules when we teach. But we have to change the rules, because there are no more plays, and then this project was presented in September 2024, but as I knew about it before we started this course, this year, I had already included information about it into our syllabus. Okay, I will look for the one of the podcasts.
Yeah, and just let me say again, this is a very simple thing. But if we had gathered here 2.5 years ago, this table would be empty of books. We are here 2.5 years later. Here is this book that was put out in Kharkiv. Here's this book of Ukrainian texts put out in Dublin. There is this book of Ukrainian texts put out in Slovakia, in Bratislava. There are these two books that were put out in the United States. There is this book of a collection of essays by an American writer about Ukrainian culture in the time of war. There is that book of Andrii Bondarenko. This has all happened in 2.5 years. All of this stuff, and I don't have nearly everything that has come out. There is an extreme growth and boom of writing and publishing of Ukrainian works since the beginning of the war. Yeah.
Okay. Tell us about the podcast.
The podcast was suggested to me by a friend of Hanna Halas. His name is Dmitry Ternovy. He lives in Kharkiv. He dodges bombs during the day. Sometimes when we Zoom in the evening, he has to say, "John, I can't come on right now. There's bombs are falling. When the electricity comes back on, I'll give you a call back." I mean, this is the reality of our work together. And it was his idea that we do a podcast based on some of the works from this book. And Nina Kamberos, the publisher, Hanna Halas, who is the playwright that Oleksandr was talking about, who wrote the play Chronicles, Dmitry Ternovy, who is my colleague and friend, and we pulled together this podcast of 9 works there's 20 works in this book. We have 9 of them performed by American, Scottish, English, and one Kosovar, English language Kosovar actor, performing the monologues that are in this book. And they're very, very powerful. 2 of them have come out. We're really very pleased. And there are 7 more to come. If you're at all interested, I highly recommend you listen. They're very, very interesting. In addition to readings of the works, the works are relatively short. In addition to the readings, there are conversations with the actors and the impressions that they have from their work, and in some cases, conversations with the writers themselves. We're very pleased with it. It's still fairly new. Welcome once again to the Dictionary of Ukrainian Emotions podcast. I am your host, John Freedman. Let me begin with a few words about our project, which is presented by Ukrainska Pravda, Ukraine's most popular internet portal.
I would say that's a very interesting product, which I personally use in class. You see, I come and we play and we discuss and we work with the text. You see, but it's an interesting type of theater because it's the theater, it's radio theater, you know. Actually, I have the last question for both of ours. It's something like, why are the Ukrainian war dramas to be translated, staged, and studied? I would answer this question because for me it was, a great great experience of using my creativity in order to resist the absurdity of the war. Your turn.
That is precisely it. All of the work that I have done for the last 2.5 years is my effort to resist the war against Ukraine. Yeah, that is it, Oleksandr. You hit the hammer, the nail on the head.
Okay. This is the end of our 2 parts, but maybe you have questions. And if you can use the microphone.
Yes.
And I will also use my microphone.
So thank you very much. It's not a question, but just a comment. Thank you. First of all, thank you for the presentations of both of you. I didn't know about your work and now I know. Thank you for your help and for all this that you're doing with translations. And I'm historian, but I know how it is extremely difficult, and especially to translate plays or poetry or so on. Just a small comment that it's like a criticism to ourselves of Ukrainians. You know, when we had a project with the director of the institute on history, it's economic development of the Black Sea region. And 2010, we went to Kiev, to scientific community of historians, so to discuss and to start our project, and we found the wall. Because first of all, they didn't know foreign languages, doesn't matter what, English or French or whatever. In connection to this, they were stuck to the Soviet style of thinking, of working, of methodologies. They were really like 30 years ago. And it took us like 2 or 3 years to persuade them that to participate in an international project, it is very important. We translate their articles, their works, so on. We try to offer something, you know, and only after 2014 and so on, they really started to understand that we need to rethink how we think, how we act, what we are doing. I very understand what I'm talking about. And of course, now it's completely different, you know, a framework and so on. It's just a criticism to us that we were like absent from the worldwide scheme in every level of, you know, communication, of collaboration. And those who knew languages, they usually emigrate to other countries. This is like a whole picture. So thank you very much for all your work and what are you doing, and I will visit your website. Thank you very much.
I can commend it. You know, I understand what you're saying because it's, you know, my major is Spanish and my second major is English, and I speak and use 2 global languages. I'm sorry for my mistakes. You know, really my grammar, English grammar, is not so bad. You know, but like I'm having trouble with eyesight, and then just is something. But I agree with you. But what happens now in some situations? We have new environments in Ukraine. For example, the Ukrainian Catholic University. I came to the Ukrainian Catholic University. It has nothing to do with the traditional Catholic universities, because when we start working with Spanish universities say, you're a Catholic university? Oh no, you are another or other Catholic university. That means, you know, very liberal, open-minded. And this is a paradoxical thing, but we have an excellent team of historians. Maybe you have heard the name of Yaroslav Gritsak and other important people, you know, and we're open now and we're doing a lot. And that's what I suggested, you know, we can think about an interesting project in the field of theater. And I can use all my contacts in Ukraine. And John, I think he knows all people in the world, you know. We can easily do something together, so it's not a problem at all.
I will just say that I've had many conversations and I've exchanged hundreds, maybe thousands of emails with Maksym Kurochkin, who is an old, very good friend. And Maksym repeatedly says, John, we wasted our lives. We were not ready. We did not see. We failed. We failed. So it's something that, yeah, I mean, I believe it's very important to say that. And I will just step back and say it's not like we failed knowing we were failing. It's not like we were doing something really all that wrong with the information we had at the time we were doing it. But looking back at it now, the world changed really fast and we did not change with it until a certain point. And so your feelings or your experience or, whatever you want to call it is a common one in the sense that it's one that everybody was caught up in, and it's one that everybody is still caught up in, and we're working our way out of it. Yeah.
Questions or comments? Or someone that would like to comment on something? I would like to say that I was amazed of anything I heard today. From your analysis and from your questions to John and his answers, it's true that we didn't know much about Ukraine and the theater in Ukraine, even the pre-war Ukraine. What about the theater in pre-war Ukraine, for example, okay? And all the things that you discuss about, even after 2014, aren't there things of a historical process? I mean, if we step out of this and see it from a distance, to me, it looks like a construction of a new identity of Ukraine outside the Soviet environment that absolutely looks to the West right now. I don't really see, I mean, I cannot understand the disappointment that you feel of that you didn't see that before. I mean, you were in this process, so I mean, isn't that a kind of a process that for example, Ukrainian people that did not see that they were part of this, and that the culture was not provided as Ukrainian culture, for example. What happened in other parts of life, except from culture, except from theater, except from arts? It reminds me very much of all the processes that happened in the 19th century when the nations tried to become independent of any kind of empires, of, on the other hand, Oleg's presentation of Ukrainian theater reminded me very much of modern movements in theater, such as using violence, for example. There was in the 90s a very, an extreme movement in your face theater, for example, that brings violence in front of the audience, very extreme language of violence, violent bodily expressions. And on the other hand, there is also, it starts another kind of theater of retrospection, as you mentioned, with the eye, body, and eye soul. It's really, I think it's very much, I made a comparison between what John was saying about your previous condition and afterwards that you were shocked, that you were something like the evacuated body you were talking about, and the split of the self, and that this kind of plays maybe proceed to something else in the future. I mean, the thing that you said that I don't remember the playwright. It was a woman of the Chronicles of the Evacuated Body and the Lost Soul. It really. Okay, thank you.
Hanna Halas.
Oh, Hanna Halas. Okay, so it's really the processes that happen in defensive mechanisms where the body really detaches from the trauma, things that happen usually in wartime, in very traumatic events. I had a lot of things to bring to my mind from what you said, and I was amazed of everything. But I just wanted to comment that it all seems often what happens and what has started happening. It seems of historic. It looks like historical processes that already has happened in the past with other nations. And I would like to ask, are there any other activities except from what you do? I mean, are these plays being translated in other languages than English? I mean, do other translators from other countries participate in these projects? Would you like to talk to us about it more?
I'll just say briefly that yes, the Finns have been very active. Elli Salo in Finland has done a tremendous amount of work, working with other translators, translating herself. Lydia Nagel in Germany has done an enormous number of translations. Ramana Maliti in the Czech Republic, in Slovakia, and Martina Palushova in the Czech Republic have all been, so yeah, it's huge. William Wong in Hong Kong has translated many things into Cantonese. It's just astonishing, actually. I mean, that's kind of banal, but to me it's not, because it's such an exciting thing to watch happen. A project takes on a life of its own, and there is some Greek. Natasha Varashbit's Bad Roads was translated partially into Greek, and it was presented in part in Athens last year at the Crossing Borders at the Crossing Borders Festival. If there's anybody interested in doing a few Greek translations and arranging some readings or some events, I would love to help. I would love to help. And I just want to answer your comment just very briefly. It's not that any of us are really beating ourselves over the head, although Max probably does, because that's the way Max is. But you wish that you were ahead of the curve. You'd like to think that you're an intelligent person taking part in the world, and you see these events coming. And in fact, Oksana and I did see them. That's one of the reasons why we left Russia, is that we saw things getting worse, much worse. But even so, we weren't as fast as the events were. The events were faster than we were, and you just have this slight regret. I wish I had been able to be ahead of that curve, and I wasn't. You know, it's just one of those things. You're absolutely right. And 100 years from now, people are going to look back and it will just be a normal process that happened in Ukraine of breaking away from, you know, the yoke of the Russian hegemony. Yeah.
This project that you're doing, translating these plays, and also Oleksandr that teaches Ukrainian war drama in the university, I think it creates a tradition of somehow using theater as a document of war times, first of all, and it may not show at the time, but in the future, future historians will probably use these plays as testimonies of what really happened, of what Ukrainian thought, of the Ukrainian thought and feelings. So I think it's very important not only for Ukraine, for the new identity of Ukraine, maybe if you can call it like that, but also on an international level. Yeah.
Yeah, I would also agree with this because paradoxically enough, but it happened to me before the war because of my interest in Spanish literature and my American academic background. But now I see that our intellectual life, our intellectual space, you know, is becoming more and more internationalized, and we are speaking the same language. We are paying terrible price for this. This is our life. But please tell Kurochkin that he has not failed. You know that you found a guy in Ukraine who yeah, is not happy to hear that. And actually, we can think about many dimensions of working together. You know, we can think about, I'm not only a professor, teacher, I'm a researcher, and we can do something more academic, less academic.
Yes. The subject of war is always very interesting, no matter of what country we're talking about.
You know, it's not only the war. Mm-hmm. It's for me, it's I teach theory of literature, and for me, it's important to see how word, how theater, how art, how literature work in this terrible situation. You see, I had read a lot about it before, but now, you know, I am involved in this process and I can see it, I can witness it, but on my level, on theoretical level, you know, on the level of theoretical reflection. And I think it really has a universal meaning, because a friend of mine, we went to the conference in Aarhus in Denmark. She kept on asking, what is new in the Ukrainian drama about war? The world theater, you know, represents war from the very beginning of the existence of theater. Now I can give some simple answers. First, theater never used social networks.
That was my next comment.
It's something, you know, we just do not understand how much it means for the global theater, not only about, so we use the social networks because we want to inform the world about our tragedy. But it's not about only this. The second thing is, by the way, the world civilization and the world theater worked with the war in the situation when the playwrights and the audience thought that war is something normal. You know, for the Greek authors of famous Greek tragedy, you know, like Trojans, we're going to stage the Trojans, the Trojan women in Ukraine, because it's about, you know, us. But for them, war was something normal. But I myself, and maybe John, we belong to the generation which were educated to think that war is not a norm anymore. That's why this war was so shocking. You see, I think it is also unique. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't want to tire anymore. I know your time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.